The steak knife was polished to a mirror shine. I remember that detail because it was the only thing that reflected my face correctly, tight-lipped, eyes hollow, forehead clenched like it was holding in something volcanic. Everything else, the candles, the white linen, the neatly folded cloth napkins, felt like props in a theater production I hadn't agreed to star in. When I walked into that private room, the one I reserved 3 months ago, the same one where my father toasted us at our engagement party, where Marlene cried because her dad gave us that antique photo album, I saw him, her manager, Leonard, sitting in my seat, not near her, not across from her, in my chair. He was swirling a glass of Pinot like he owned the vineyard, jacket off, tie loosened like he was winding down after something, not waiting for anything. His fingers brushed the stem of the glass with the kind of casual entitlement that only ever grows in the dark, like mold. He looked comfortable, too comfortable. Marlene didn't flinch, didn't rise to greet me. She just tilted her head and said, "Oh, you made it." Like I was the late guest, like I'd crashed their party. I didn't speak right away. I just stared at her, then at him, then at the place setting, my name printed on a little white card next to a single rose. The rose she used to insist we bring to every anniversary dinner as tradition. I walked to the table, slow, calm. I leaned in, voice low enough that only she could hear. "I warned you, if he shows up." She smiled, not sheepishly, not with guilt, with teeth, like she wanted me to see. "Don't be ridiculous," she whispered back, brushing my arm like I was the child in the room. "We're just having dinner. Be gracious." Her manager laughed, just a little exhale through his nose. He didn't look at me. That was the insult. He looked through me, like I wasn't even part of the scene, so I nodded, straightened my jacket. "Enjoy dinner," I said. Then I left. No slam of the door, no raised voice. Just the sound of my shoes on hardwood. You could have heard a steak sizzle in that silence. I passed the maitre d' without a word, walked past the live piano, past the couple celebrating their engagement, past the hostess who looked up and blinked when she saw me leave alone. I didn't stop walking until I hit the cold air of the parking lot, where the wind hit me like a slap I didn't realize I needed. Now here's the part where I should say I broke down, that I sat in the car and cried, that I punched the steering wheel, shouted into the dashboard, something cathartic. But I didn't. I drove, quiet, focused, hands at 10 and 2 like I was on a test. Because I was. See, this wasn't a breakdown. This was a beginning. They thought that was the scene, the climax of some slow marital drift. But I knew better. That dinner wasn't a betrayal. It was permission. She handed it to me, served on china and garnished with arrogance. And if you're still listening, if this caught your gut the same way it grabbed mine, then do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button. More than 97% of people just listen without it. But if you're one of the few who does, it tells the team these stories matter, that we matter, that men like me aren't crazy. We're just done being polite about betrayal. Because here's what they didn't realize. I didn't walk out because I was defeated. I walked out because I had already won. Marlene didn't panic right away. That's the part that still stings, honestly. She just assumed that I'd cool off, sleep it off, come back like a loyal dog who got spooked by fireworks. She thought I'd sulk in a hotel room for a night, maybe crash at a friend's place, lick my wounded pride, then return with takeout and a sheepish, "Let's talk." But when she got home that night, she noticed the key tray by the door was empty. My set of house keys, car fob, mailbox key, the little worn one from our beach condo, gone. The closet, half of it stripped, not in a rage either. No mess, no chaos. Just gaps. Gaps where my shoes were, where the luggage used to sit, where the drawer of passports and documents used to hum with quiet authority. The thing about silence is it's only scary when you realize it's not passive. Mine was active, precise, a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. She texted me once. "Scott, come on, can we talk?" No reply. She called. I didn't pick up. She waited until morning, tried again. Still nothing. By the second day, she sent him a message. "You really upset him." His response came back 5 minutes later. "He'll get over it. He's emotional. All that old school loyalty stuff. He'll cool down." That's the moment he lost the game. That one smug sentence. Because I don't cool down. I congeal. I ferment. I take the insult, age it like whiskey, and bottle it with intent. By the third day, I had switched phone providers, rerouted all statements to a different address, logged out of every shared account, not with fury, with method. By the fourth, I was in touch with two very calm men in suits, both of whom I'd paid generously over the years to keep certain ownership documents updated but quiet. On the 5th, I removed myself from our joint bank account, not illegally, not sneakily, just according to the rules. The same rules she used to quote at me when she got her MBA and thought I couldn't keep up. On the 6th, I called the holding company. Mine, quietly mine. I never used it for show, just for structure, legacy, control. And on the 7th, oh, the 7th, Leonard showed up at work and tried to badge in. Access denied. At first he thought it was a glitch, swiped again. The little red light on the scanner blinked at him like a knowing smirk. Security appeared like they'd rehearsed it. "Sir," one of them said, all velvet gloves and hidden muscle, "we'll need you to come with us." He puffed up like a cartoon. "Are you serious?" They didn't answer. They just led him down the hall, past reception, past the marketing wing where he used to flirt with interns in plain sight, past the second-floor lounge where he once joked loudly about how the owner's probably some dusty fossil sitting in a tax haven. They led him to HR. There, a sealed envelope sat on the table. He opened it with the cockiness of a man who thinks everything is a misunderstanding. Inside, effective immediately, you are suspended pending investigation into conduct violations and conflict of interest activities. During this period, all access to company systems and premises is revoked. He scoffed. Who signed off on this? The HR manager didn't blink, just pointed to the second page. Signature, Scott R. Matheson. Title, Chairman, SRM Holdings. For a moment, Leonard just stared at the name, as if it didn't compute, as if the man he thought was harmless, the husband he openly mocked, the guy who walked out without a fight, wasn't the same man who now sat atop the paper mountain beneath his feet. He looked up like the room had turned cold. Someone was pulling strings, and for the first time he realized it wasn't him. Leonard strutted into the building like nothing had changed. He wore that same too-tight blazer that broadcast confidence while concealing nothing. His gait screamed authority. His cologne was the kind of overcompensation you could smell before you saw him. And in his mind, yesterday's suspension letter was just a temporary inconvenience, an HR blunder, a mistake to be smoothed over with charm and a firm handshake. He didn't know that charm had expired, that the handshake had been revoked, along with the floor beneath his feet. At 7:57 a.m., he approached the turnstiles and swiped his keycard. Beep, red light, access denied. He paused, swiped again. Beep, red light, denied. A few heads turned. Reception froze mid-conversation. The building had an unspoken rule. When someone's card fails twice, everyone pretends not to notice, but everyone notices. He banged the side of the reader like it owed him something. "Damn it, it's this thing again," he mumbled to no one. Loud enough, though, to imply the system was broken, not him. Within seconds, 2 security staff approached. One he knew, old Greg, former Marine, quiet as a chapel. The other was new, bigger, younger, less fond of Leonard. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to step aside," the younger one said, polite but firm. "I'm late for an executive call," Leonard snapped. "We've been instructed to escort you to HR," Greg said calmly, nodding toward the elevator. Leonard hesitated, eyes darting around like maybe he'd find an ally, someone to vouch for him. But the front desk lady looked down, the barista turned her back, and the IT guy near the printer disappeared like smoke. No backup, no lifeline, just 2 security guys and a walk of shame. He followed, lips pursed, trying to keep the power in his stride. The elevator ride was silent, too silent, the kind that stretches seconds into hours. Leonard kept adjusting his tie like the problem was in the knot, not in the entire structure beneath it. On the 9th floor, HR was waiting. They didn't greet him, didn't offer coffee or water, just a thick envelope on a brushed steel table, a chair. He sat without being asked, opened the envelope, the same letter from yesterday, word for word. But this time it wasn't anonymous. This time it was official, printed in crisp black ink at the bottom of the page, Scott R. Matheson, Chairman, SRM Holdings. He blinked, once, twice, then frowned. Wait, this can't be that Scott Matheson, He trailed off, the sentence refusing to finish itself, because the only truth left was standing in front of him, sealed and signed. He chuckled, a nervous bark of disbelief. "So this is personal? Because I had dinner with his wife?" "No," the HR director said evenly. "This is procedural. Conduct violations, breach of internal code, nepotism, improper use of expense accounts, and," she tapped the folder, "what appears to be repeated boundary crossing with a subordinate." Leonard's smirk faltered. "What subordinate?" The director raised an eyebrow. Your expense logs list over a dozen working dinners at locations with no meeting notes, no follow-up memos, and multiple shared rides, always charged to the company card, always with Mrs. Marlene Matheson. His throat dried instantly. That's my employee. She reports to me. That's not. Exactly, the director said, and then silence again. He sat back, pale now, eyes darting to the glass wall of the HR office as if someone might be out there watching. And someone was. Across the hallway, in an office he once dismissed as storage, the blinds twitched slightly. Scott wasn't hiding. He just knew exactly where to stand. Leonard stood abruptly. I want to speak to legal. This is insane. This is retaliation. You're free to do so, the director replied. From home. What? You've been placed on administrative leave, effective immediately, until the investigation concludes. Your system's access has been revoked. Personal effects will be mailed. Leonard's mouth opened, but no words came. His kingdom, built on bluffs and charm, was being disassembled, one locked door, one signature at a time. He wasn't just being shut out, he was being erased, quietly, legally. And the worst part, he couldn't even find the edges of the trap, because Scott hadn't made a scene. He'd built a mechanism, and now it was running. Marlene stood in the hallway outside the compliance office like someone waiting for test results. She hadn't come here by accident. She didn't just drop by. This was a last resort, the kind of errand you run when the facade starts crumbling and your manager's usual smirks stop working. Scott's sister, Dana, looked up from her desk with that same sharp, surgical calm she'd always had. Same blunt-cut hair, same glasses she'd worn since the early 2000s, same ability to see through you in under 10 seconds. She didn't stand, didn't greet her with a fake smile, just set her pen down. What do you need, Marlene? Marlene closed the door behind her, more out of reflex than planning. I need to know if this is serious. Dana blinked once. If what is serious? Scott, Marlene snapped, folding her arms. The suspension letter, the HR drama. Leonard says it's personal. Dana gave a single dry chuckle. Leonard says a lot of things, none of them under oath. I'm asking you, Marlene pressed, walking toward the desk. Is Scott really involved? Like, does he have that kind of power? Dana leaned back slightly, studying her. You married the man, Marlene, lived in his houses, vacationed on his land, and now you're asking me if he has power? Marlene's face tightened. Come on, Dana, you know what I mean? No, Dana said, sitting up. I don't, but I'll explain it to you anyway. She opened a drawer, pulled out a slim red binder, unmarked but obviously used. She laid it flat and flipped to a page already bookmarked. Take a look. Marlene hesitated before leaning in. There it was. SRM Holdings, LLC, breakdown of ownership, Scott R. Matheson, 62% controlling interest Dana J. Matheson, 12% remaining shares split across passive investors. Below that, a list of properties under lease. The fifth entry down, Beacon Tower, floors 122, lease to Ovant Strategies, Inc. Marlene's breath caught. That's, yes, Dana said flatly, Leonard's company. She kept turning pages. Lease agreements, signed, dated, renewed, annotated with red tags. Page after page showed the same name in the upper right corner, Scott R. Matheson. Marlene sat back, stunned. But they've always said the building belonged to Bristol Group, that it was held in portfolio by Bristol is a shell, Dana cut in. It's a real company, just not for the reasons you think. Scott structured it to mask direct ownership so he could operate cleanly. He never wanted people treating him differently just because his name was on the deed. Marlene blinked rapidly. He told me he worked in consulting. He does, Dana said, for his own company, which owns your firm's building, which means, she paused for effect, Leonard's little kingdom, it's rented, and the landlord just found termites. Marlene didn't speak. She stared at the binder like it was written in another language. He never said anything, she murmured. He never acted like what? Dana asked, standing now. Like a man who needed to prove something? Scott didn't wave money in people's faces. He doesn't need applause. He just builds, and protects, and watches. Marlene's hands were trembling now, just slightly. She leaned on the desk to hide it. This is a misunderstanding. He's reacting emotionally. I mean, he walked out of a dinner. Dana stared. That dinner? The one where you let your manager sit in the chair where Dad toasted him at his wedding anniversary? Where you invited another man to celebrate your marriage in place of your husband? Marlene looked away. Dana closed the binder. You think he's reacting emotionally? She said, voice low now. No, Scott doesn't react. He plans. You think he married without protecting the very foundation beneath his feet? There was no sarcasm in her tone, no smugness, just disappointment. Marlene backed toward the door, fumbling for the handle. She didn't remember the walk back to her floor, just the pounding in her ears. Because it wasn't just a bad night. It wasn't just an overreaction. It was a reckoning. And every time she stepped into that office building now, it didn't feel like a job. It felt like trespassing. The envelope arrived in a thick white sleeve, hand-delivered by a courier in a dark suit with an expression like stone. Not FedEx, not some intern with a clipboard. This guy looked like he'd delivered subpoenas to senators. His ID badge read, Private Dispatch Group, a name designed to sound boring and terrifying at the same time. He walked straight past reception, didn't sign the visitor log, didn't wait for permission. He asked for the director of operations by name, and when someone stammered that he wasn't in yet, the courier simply left the envelope with legal. Time stamped at 9:01 a.m., he said, and then vanished the way only paid messengers do, efficient, silent, untouchable. By 9:04 a.m., the envelope had been opened. By 9:07 a.m., it was forwarded to the entire executive team. By 9:12 a.m., Leonard's name was whispered in 3 separate conference rooms. The letter was titled, Notice of Lease Review, Occupancy Breach Allegation, and Enforcement of Clause 14. It wasn't dramatic. That's what made it worse. No threats, no bold red letters, just precision, legal formatting, professional grammar. A full review of the lease agreement between SRM Holdings and Ovant Strategies, Inc., outlining specific provisions in the original 2011 contract, pages no one had read in years, pages no one thought mattered, until now. And then came the bomb. Clause 14, Discretionary Termination. At the sole discretion of the property owner, occupancy rights may be terminated upon verified breach of ethical or professional conduct within tenant operations that negatively impacts the building's business integrity, reputation, or public image. The email thread started within minutes. Wait, this is real? Why didn't anyone know about Clause 14? Who the hell owns this building again? And then came the line that froze every blood vessel in legal. Owner, SRM Holdings. Majority partner, Scott R. Matheson. Marlene saw her manager, Leonard, read that line and go pale. At first, he tried to laugh it off. This is posturing, he said to the room. He's trying to shake us. This is bluff. I've seen it before. We'll counter with a settlement offer, play hardball, call in Briston. But this wasn't Briston. Briston was owned by SRM, and SRM was not bluffing, because stapled behind the letter was a detailed ethics report, 6 pages long, compiled over 2 months. It cited incident dates, expense reports, inappropriate communications, office surveillance logs, discrepancies in compliance, and 2 entries highlighted in yellow, repeated after-hours visits by Marlene Matheson to Leonard V. Corman's private office, Suite 1216, including non-recorded calendar entries labeled Strategy Sync and Manager Wellness. Multiple unlogged company-funded meals billed as client development with no substantiated client record. Leonard stared at the document like it had teeth. This is a hit job, he hissed under his breath. It's documentation, someone else said quietly. By noon, the board was alerted. By 2, outside counsel was called. By 5, they knew. They'd laughed at a man whose name was on the lease. Now, every meeting room felt like a trap. Every floor tile felt rented, because it was. The janitor on the 15th floor started whistling House of the Rising Sun, and no one knew if it was a coincidence or a message. In the executive lounge, Marlene sat in a chair that now felt cold, staring at her phone screen like it held a bomb she couldn't defuse. She opened her messages. Scott, you made your choice, so did I. She never responded, because what could she say? She had mocked the man who held the foundation, and now the foundation was shifting. The building hadn't collapsed, but you could feel it, in the creaks of the floorboards, in the sudden silence of morning chatter, in the red glow of a badge reader flashing denied on the wrong wrist. Clause 14 wasn't revenge, it was a door closing, and the locks had already been changed. The unraveling didn't start with a scandalous headline or a lawsuit. It started with a tremor, subtle, barely noticed. A few unanswered calls, a couple of missed calendar invites, then a whisper in the investor Slack channel. By the time leadership noticed the cracks, it was already too late. The Friday morning board update was supposed to be routine, but the second slide in the deck had a typo. Leonard's title was missing. Just blank space where it should have said Managing Director. It was subtle, But in these circles, subtle means intentional. Then someone leaked the letter, the lease clause, the ethics report, not to the press. No, that would have been too fast, too dramatic. This was slower, more elegant, the way rot spreads in the beams of a house. By Monday, 3 minor investors had pulled out for liquidity reasons. The accounting team's group chat lit up with nervous emoji. HR canceled the Spring Forward networking event, and someone from facilities posted a cryptic memo about potential changes to tenant infrastructure that sent the internal channels into a full-blown panic spiral. Marlene tried to stay calm. She still had her office, her desk, her reputation, but there was a new tightness in her voice during meetings, a new shakiness in her smile. And then the first leak happened. An email, plain, short, brutal, forwarded from an anonymous account, sent directly to the board and a dozen senior staff. Dinner last night was magic. If he ever finds out, I'll just tell him we were talking strategy. Marlene M. to Leonard C. August 18th, 9:17 p.m. No attachments, no context, just the line, the wink, and the firestorm it lit. Within hours, a second message arrived. This one included 2 JPEGs, a hotel receipt and a blurry security cam still from the elevator. Same date, same strategy meeting. Marlene in a navy dress, Leonard holding 2 glasses. Then came the texts. Not from a company phone, not from Slack or Teams. These were screenshots. Intimate, arrogant, stupid. We've got him wrapped. He sulks, but he's soft. He won't leave. He's too old-fashioned. Just keep being sweet when he gets moody. It's not cheating if your marriage is a retirement plan. The senders? Both of them. Marlene and Leonard. The signature on the email that forwarded all these messages? Sender. anon@sonramholdings.com. No reply field. No IP trace. Just 3 letters stamped at the bottom of each file. SRM. When the board met behind closed doors that week, the tension was thick enough to eat with a fork. Leonard's name was barely mentioned. Marlene's, uttered only in hushed tones, usually followed by compliance review or optics risk. The firm issued a memo, corporate language, legal safe. We take all concerns regarding internal conduct seriously. Our leadership team remains committed to transparency, ethical practices, and maintaining trust with our clients and partners. But no one believed it. Not anymore. The real storm wasn't what happened. It was what might happen next. Would there be a lawsuit, a buyout, a quiet gutting of upper management? Every hallway meeting ended with side eyes. Every Zoom call felt like a firing squad in slow motion. And then the biggest investor of them all, the one with the deep generational money, called for a special audit. That was the moment the walls stopped just closing. They began to tilt. Leadership tried to contain it. Spokespeople repeated the word isolated incident so many times it lost all meaning. But no one could deny what was now obvious. They had built their empire on a borrowed floor, and the landlord wasn't just knocking, he was peeling back the foundation with surgical grace. Marlene stopped showing up in person. Leonard vanished completely. His office was cleared overnight. No notice, no explanation. His nameplate? Gone. The hallway where it once hung now had a pale rectangle where the brass used to shine. Inside accounting, someone whispered, "It's like he was never here." But he had been. And now? So had Scott. Not as a husband, not as a victim, as the architect. Because this wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. And the only thing louder than the silence now was the sound of the building sinking. The air at the PR brunch was drenched in desperation masked as elegance, white linen tables, soft jazz playing on loop, smiles stretched too wide over too many lies. A corporate garden event for stakeholder reassurance, they'd called it. But the real purpose was obvious. Calm the investors, show strength, pretend nothing was burning behind the scenes. They even moved the venue to the first-floor atrium of the tower itself, as if being literally inside the building they were accused of mismanaging would remind everyone that the structure was still standing, still real, still theirs. Except, of course, it wasn't. Marlene arrived fashionably late in a soft lavender blazer, the same one she wore the day she was promoted. Leonard walked half a step behind her, shades on, trying to pull off contrition wrapped in confidence. The plan was simple: show up, smile, shake hands, and make everyone forget the past 6 weeks ever happened. At the main entrance, 2 security guards flanked the doors. One was new, the other, old Greg, met them with a look that wasn't quite hostile, but definitely not warm. "Name?" the younger one asked, clipboard in hand. Marlene tilted her head. "You know who we are." The younger one nodded. "Yes, ma'am, just confirming access." Leonard stepped forward, already annoyed. We're here for the Ovant brunch. I'm Leonard Corman. She's... But the guard cut him off, calmly reaching into a folder and pulling out an envelope. This is for you, Mr. Corman. Leonard frowned. What is this? He opened it, read one sentence, stopped breathing. This building is under my name. Get out. Scott R. Matheson underneath, in smaller text. Per enforcement of lease termination under Clause 14, you are no longer permitted access to the premises. Your personal items have been boxed and are available for pickup by courier only. Leonard blinked. Once, twice. The same man who used to barrel through boardrooms now stood frozen on a welcome mat, holding paper that might as well have been dynamite. I don't think you understand, he said to the guard, his voice tight, faltering. This event, this brunch, I'm invited. You were, the younger guard said evenly. You're not anymore. Marlene tried to step in, voice low but shaking. This is overkill. It's a public event. He's here to clarify things. People are expecting... No one is expecting him, Greg said gently. They've moved on. Behind them, guests began to turn. The music didn't stop, but it dimmed. Conversations paused. Phones came out. The hush of a watching crowd grew thick. Leonard looked over his shoulder like he might find someone to rescue him, an ally, a friendly face. But the investors he'd once charmed sipped their champagne and adjusted their sunglasses. HR avoided eye contact. The head of accounting actually took a photo. The moment stretched. No one said a word in his defense. The younger guard cleared his throat. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, Mr. Corman. Now. Leonard took one step back. His shoe caught on the edge of the stone tile and he stumbled, not dramatically, but just enough. Enough to make it human, awkward, pathetic. He steadied himself and looked to Marlene for support. She didn't meet his gaze. Instead, she pulled her hand from his arm like it burned. Then she turned around and walked away. The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss, locking into place. And just like that, the man who'd once strutted through these halls like he owned them was standing on the outside of glass he could no longer touch. Inside, champagne corks popped again. A pianist resumed the melody. Someone laughed. And over it all, like the quiet toll of a distant bell, Marlene finally heard the truth that had been circling her for weeks. Scott hadn't made a scene. He hadn't shouted or thrown things or begged anyone to believe him. He had simply changed the locks. And the land they mocked him on, it was his. It had always been his. The gravel crunched under her heels as she stepped out of the car. Dust rose in lazy spirals under the late afternoon sun. It wasn't the kind of place Scott used to frequent, too remote, too still, but somehow it made sense now. A modest ranch-style house nestled in the hills, no neighbors, no Wi-Fi, no one to interrupt a man mid-thought. She wasn't sure how she found him, part instinct, part desperation. The old security app on her phone had pinged when a gate sensor triggered 2 nights ago, one of the properties he kept but rarely visited. Most wives would have never noticed it. She had. Too late. The front porch was simple. No shoes at the door, no porch swing like their lake house used to have, just a single chair and a half-empty glass of tea sweating on the rail. Scott sat inside, back to her, reading something, legal maybe, or just pretending to. He didn't turn when the door opened. Marlene hesitated. You always said this place was too quiet, she said softly, as if nostalgia might patch what was broken. Scott didn't answer, didn't move. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The air smelled like pine and paper, clean, cold, distant. Why didn't you just tell me? She asked, trying to steady her voice. About the building, the ownership, everything. He turned a page. I did, he said simply. No, I mean, really tell me. Not with cryptic warnings, not with that passive-aggressive enjoy dinner line. Now he turned slowly, calmly. I said if he shows up, I walk. That wasn't cryptic, that was a warning, one you laughed at. Marlene flinched. It was just dinner, Scott. You walked out of 25 years over dinner? No, he said, standing. I walked out because you didn't believe I would. Because you looked at me like I was decoration, like I'd keep showing up just because I always had. That wasn't a dinner, Marlene. That was your declaration. She stepped closer, hands open. I didn't mean it like that. It wasn't some grand betrayal. I made a mistake. He cut her off with the same quiet tone he always used when he was done being nice. This isn't about a mistake. This is about a pattern, a choice, repeated, brushed off, justified with a smirk. Marlene's voice cracked. But we built so much. Everything we have. I built, Scott said. You performed. Silence. Heavy. She looked around. No photos on the walls, no traces of the life they used to share. just clean surfaces and empty corners. It felt like a waiting room for decisions that had already been made. "You're overreacting," she whispered. He shook his head. "I'm correcting." "Correcting what? Me?" "My judgment," he said. "I made a poor one. I let comfort blind me, loyalty become inertia." Marlene felt the air squeeze from her lungs. "You're not even angry," she said. "No," Scott replied. "That's the point. Anger passes. I'm past it." She blinked hard. "Then what are you doing?" He looked at her, expression unreadable. "Ending something that already ended. I'm just the one signing the paperwork." Her throat closed. "You still love me?" He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because the worst kind of heartbreak isn't the one that screams. It's the one that answers with silence. He turned back to the table, picked up the folder, handed it to her. Inside, the finalized divorce documents, already notarized, already courier ready. She looked up at him, eyes wide. "You really meant all of this?" "I meant every word I ever said," Scott replied. "You just stopped hearing them." Marlene's hands trembled as she clutched the folder. "What am I supposed to do with all of this?" Scott nodded toward the door. "Whatever you want. But this chapter, it's over. I'm not revising it." She stared at him for a long moment, waiting for some hint of warmth. A pause, a flinch. There was nothing, just conclusion. The knock came mid-morning on a Thursday, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the hollow quiet of the condo like a gavel. Marlene had barely peeled herself out of bed. The place still smelled like fresh paint and unfamiliar wood polish. Too new, too sterile, like a showroom staged for someone else's life. The kind of place you move into, not because you want to, but because the court told you this is what you get. She pulled on a robe, shuffled to the door, half hoping it was someone who'd made a mistake. Delivery, wrong floor, a neighbor looking for their cat. But when she opened it, it wasn't confusion that greeted her. It was inevitability. A man in a charcoal suit, crisp, folded, carrying a black leather briefcase and that particular type of stillness that only comes from decades in litigation. "Mrs. Matheson?" he asked. She flinched at the name. "X," she mumbled. He nodded. "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Matheson's estate counsel. May I come in?" She didn't answer, just stepped aside. The man entered without hesitation, placing the briefcase gently on the dining table, the one piece of furniture she'd managed to pick out herself in a desperate bid to make the condo feel like more than a sentence. He opened the case, removed a single folder, thick but not overwhelming, clean, labeled. She recognized Scott's style instantly. "This," he began, "is the finalized transfer package." She stared. "Transfer?" The lawyer nodded. "Divorce petition, asset separation, and allocation of remaining holdings. Mr. Matheson has signed all relevant documentation. This is your copy." He slid the folder toward her. She didn't touch it. "You'll see the asset list includes the downtown condo, transferred to your name as per his direction, furniture included. Vehicle title has been reassigned as well, the Lexus, not the Range Rover. As for liquid accounts," she raised a hand. "Just how much did I lose?" The lawyer blinked slowly. "You didn't lose anything, ma'am. This was never a contest. Mr. Matheson simply reclaimed what was his." She opened the folder with trembling fingers. First page, divorce decree, signed, stamped, final, no contest. Second, real estate holdings. Scott's name removed from 3 properties, not because she got them, but because they were now placed into trusts, irrevocable, ironclad. Next page, financial assets, stock portfolios, investment accounts, retirement holdings, all consolidated under new legal entities, each one bearing the same suffix, Matheson Legacy Trust. She flipped faster, pages blurring, eyes scanning for anything that looked like compromise, anything that looked like mercy. Near the back of the folder, a single sheet stood out. No financial data, no title deed, just a printout of a text message. Her words, from weeks ago, sent to Leonard. "He's harmless. He'll sulk, but he's soft." Stamped at the top in bold red font, submitted as evidence. Her breath hitched. The lawyer didn't comment, just slid a second sheet forward, an acknowledgement of receipt. "I'll need your signature here," he said quietly. She signed. What else could she do? When he stood to leave, she found herself grasping for something. Anything. "Did he say anything else?" she asked, voice almost too soft to hear. "To you? About me?" The lawyer paused at the door. "He said to tell you," he began, then stopped, reconsidered. "No," he said finally. "He didn't." And with that, he was gone. She stood there for a long time, the folder heavy in her hands. It felt less like paper and more like a series of cold verdicts. Not cruel, just final. She wandered to the window. The view overlooked a strip mall and a 6-lane road, nothing like the mountain house, nothing like the downtown skyline they once watched from their penthouse balcony. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with a calendar alert. It was still set to remind her of their anniversary. She turned it off, and for the first time she understood. Scott never raised his voice, never slammed a door, never stooped to vengeance, because he didn't need to. He just waited for the moment her own words would deliver the sentence. And now, all that was left was the silence she once mistook for softness, wrapped around her like a verdict that would never be overturned. The lobby was quieter than he remembered. Not silent exactly. The soft click of heels, the buzz of overhead lights, the receptionist murmuring into a headset, but muted, like the building was still holding its breath, unsure of what was about to happen. Scott stepped through the rotating doors without hesitation, dressed in a navy blazer that didn't announce wealth but whispered competence. He carried no entourage, no legal team, no fanfare, just a well-worn briefcase and the exact amount of calm it took to terrify men like Leonard. The security guard at the front desk, not Greg, a new kid now, stiffened slightly when he recognized the name on the visitor list. "Mr. Matheson?" he asked. Scott nodded. "Just here for the handoff." Upstairs, the boardroom was already being rearranged. Gone were the gaudy art pieces Leonard had insisted on hanging, the custom bar cart he never used, the sleek, soulless branding panels. In their place, boxes, labels, a team of quiet, focused professionals with checklists and earpieces. SRM Holdings had sent them, not to destroy, not to renovate, but to erase, to cleanse. He walked the halls slowly, taking in the echo of footsteps, the smell of lemon oil from the wood polish, the faint trace of old ambition clinging to the air. It was like revisiting the shell of a house long since emptied of laughter and light. Outside the conference room, a secretary, one of the few who remained, spotted him. She was young, maybe late 20s, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion that clung to everyone left behind. She hesitated, then asked, "You really gave it all up?" Scott glanced at the doorway, where movers were removing the last of the Avant-branded furniture. He looked back at her and smiled faintly. "Not gave," he said, "reclaimed." She didn't press, just nodded and turned away. Inside the boardroom, a man in a gray suit approached, the new tenant's rep. He offered a firm handshake, the kind that said, "We've done our homework." He didn't make small talk. He thanked Scott for the smooth transition, promised to respect the space. Scott didn't respond to that part. Respect was something you showed before the transfer, not after. He walked to the far window, the one that faced west, the one Leonard used to boast about. Best sunset in the city, right over the river. Scott had stood here once, long ago, when he first bought the lease under a different shell company. Back when Leonard was still just a name on a proposal, back when Marlene still wore the necklace he gave her for their 5th anniversary and called him her compass. Now the sun was out, high and sharp, no golden hour, no glow, just light, clean, unforgiving. Scott turned, took one last look at the room, nothing to fix, nothing to fight for, just echoes. He stepped into the hallway and paused at the tenant directory. 2 names had been removed that morning. The brass plates weren't pried off. They were dissolved, their adhesive wiped, their space left empty until new names could be etched in. Avant Strategies, Leonard Corman, Marlene Matheson gone. Scott ran a finger over the blank slot. He didn't smile, didn't frown either, just nodded once, like a man closing a door behind him without slamming it. At the elevator, he pressed the button, waited, no rush. When the doors opened, he stepped in, alone. As they closed, someone from operations caught a glimpse of him through the glass and whispered, "That's him." No one else said anything, because what could they say? He hadn't raged, he hadn't begged, he hadn't made speeches, he'd simply watched, waited, and then moved every piece exactly once. Now, there was nothing left to prove, only the quiet, and in that quiet, a kind of peace, not soft, not gentle, ruthless peace. The kind that comes when you finally take back the pen, flip to the last page, and write the final line yourself, then walk off, briefcase in hand, while the story ends behind you.